Well, welcome into the True Man Podcast. Today, let's talk about a topic that we've roughly touched on before. Back on episode 11, we really got into divorce a little bit and loneliness. But this whole idea of divorce and working with men has a lot of legs. So, what we want to do today is talk with someone who can help us walk through divorce and how to overcome everything that goes on during that time. So on today's show, welcome Madhur Seth with Men's Divorce Survival. He trains men up to rebuild their lives after divorce or separation, overcoming trauma and PTSD, finding mental strength on how to thrive again as a single man. Hey Madhur, how are you, man?
I'm well, Mike. How are you? Good to see you. Good to be on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for being on. So I got to start with this. You've entered this arena, and like many of us who get into coaching, you've done it for a reason. There's a purpose behind it. So tell us, how did you get to this point where you could lend your experience from the school of hard knocks, right? That's how we do it. How do you get to this point where you're like, I'm going to help other men get through this time and place because it's rough. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you enter into all this.
Sure, Mike. Sure. I'll basically tell you what happened to me. I was effectively in marriage for around about 16 years. And in the early days, of course, as most marriages are, they're pretty good. And as quite a responsible man and a man who really has a view towards the future for creating that was my view was to create a great life, to have kids, to do the whole package. And really, deep down, what really, and I think that resonates with a lot of men, is this desire to really be the provider and be the strength of the family, and really have that whole package together.
Yeah.
And initially, that was great. It went very well. I feel perhaps I may have married somebody who had a lot of troubles of our own in the past, and I do find that speaking with other men, there's a lot of women that they may be married to who have their own issues in the past, maybe who feel that they haven't lived their lives as an exciting life as they wanted to have when they were younger, and then come into the marriage and find that that really marriage itself is a long struggle, and it's a long journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a bit of a marathon. And if you haven't kind of done all the things you really want to do as a woman or even as a man, but if you haven't done it, especially as a woman, and you find yourself in the restrictions that a marriage naturally imposes, sometimes that can cause a huge break, because the woman says, well, I really want to go ahead and, especially as women get older, they suddenly become more aware of what they're capable of possibilities, and so on. And that's pretty much what happened to me, where I feel that my ex-wife found that she suddenly has a whole wealth of things that she wanted to do that she never had a chance to do, and that wasn't really tying up with the whole idea behind marriage, behind what marriage really entails.
Yeah, so that can be a struggle if you go down that road, for sure. So at the point where she's kind of going down that road, you guys have kids, you have children?
Yeah, and we have kids. Again, in society, a lot of the role for taking care of kids falls to women. Although I will say, quite honestly, and this is not me trying to say anything that I'm anything extra special, but I did put a lot of time, investment, effort into my own. I only have one kid, actually, sorry, but I put a lot of time, investment, effort into my kid, And I'm sure there's a lot of fathers out there who do that, but typically, there's a lot of pressure on women, especially in the early stages when the kids are young and they can't return back to work straight away and so on. So there's a lot of that pressure. And I will say that I put a lot of work in myself. However, that whole package of all those pressures put together can lead. It's like a pressure cooker, it just can just
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
sometimes,
Yeah.
And so and another point is that it's not just that. It's not just my particular story. There are many reasons why divorce occurs, and typically, it's not just always the woman who instigates the divorce. There are obviously guys the men who instigate.
I always say it takes two to tango, right?
Right. However, the statistic is that 80% of divorces are instigated by women because for whatever the reasons are, but that's what the actual statistic is showing. So
Big number.
It's a big number. And now this is where I can tell you about the rest of what happened was. So we got divorced. I think my ex-wife was so keen to actually go ahead and meet somebody else and just start living that life that it happened before we were divorced. So I kind of discovered that it wasn't a good time for me for many reasons, which I will explain later on. But that's fine. But the other thing was with that is the aspect that as a man, you put so much effort. A lot of men put a lot of effort, financially, time-wise, into their families and their kids. And when suddenly you get this kind of huge rejection from somebody who you felt where you really trusted and
Right.
who you always felt that you're always going to be able to work through these problems, and suddenly you get rejected. That feeling of rejection is very, very difficult for men to deal with. It's very, very difficult. And if you tie that up with the percentage or the statistic that it is 80% women who instigate divorces, it kind of shows you that it's the men who take the brunt of the pressure, but nobody really realizes this. And I'm not saying all guys are great guys. Guys are really bad, right? Yeah. We do some really, so this is not, as I say, I've said it many times, this is not a persecution of women or anything like that. This is not meant to be about that, not at all. It is more a case of, what's the reality behind all of this? So there's all of that. And then, during the time when I was in my deepest, darkest days, it just so happened that I started to lose friends. I started to lose male friends. I think in the 2 years when I was in going through the separation and the divorce, concurrently, I lost 4 men to suicide, 4 male friends to suicide, which was really shocking for me. And they were all, those four suicides were related to relationship problems or marital problems.
So these 4 guys all had gone through a divorce or were headed that direction in one way or another?
They were heading in that direction. One of them had already gone through a divorce, but 2 others were in the middle of a divorce and just found themselves effectively separated from their kids. Obviously, these guys are pretty good fathers,
So how does that impact you? I mean, you're seeing, are you thinking, oh my gosh, another man down? What, how does this affect your mental attitude? I mean, if you're going through it yourself and now you're seeing other guys being taken out, how does that affect you?
Yeah, so it had a reverse effect on me to what one might, which was, hey, if that's what's going on out there, I'm not going to let this happen to me. And I'm going to find strategies to fight this through. And and that's when I started to speak to psychologists, neuroscientists. I really came to to learn a lot from what, in terms of what's really going on in the mind, not only on a psychological level, but actually on a physiological level in the neuroscience of it. And I realized that, the trauma itself, this huge trauma kind of effect, can be a positive thing if you look at it in terms of that that effectively, let me give you an analogy. It's going to take a couple of minutes, but I hope you don't mind.
You go.
Let's say you have a city that's been bombed, okay? In wherever in the world, it's been bombed, and initially it's a big shock.
Yeah.
But the people of that city usually, in most cases in history, have eventually stood up and said, you know what, we're going to build our city even stronger. We're going to make it even better than it was before.
Well, I think we're seeing that in Ukraine right now. Yeah. I mean, these people are putting on, God bless them. They're putting on a fight right now.
Yeah.
And it's a David versus Goliath match. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. And you know what? Here's the analogy. That's what happens with trauma. If you look at trauma, especially PTSD, it's basically I found out from neuroscientists that what it represents is a complete breakdown of your mental circuits, right? Your neural circuits in your mind. And you can either view that as a very negative thing, or you can say, hey, my complete idea about reality has been so distorted now, has been so destroyed. It's like destroying a whole city. But I can build my neural network up here in my mind better this time, the second time round after PTSD. So it's just how you look at it. And I just thought, well, this is what I'm going to use this as a methodology for myself to make myself a better, stronger man.
Yeah.
And that was the reality of it. I mean, I didn't lose a further 2 friends, but so in total 6 men had this situation in their lives. 4 I lost. 2 others, actually, one of them they saved, but he was in hospital for, I don't know, 4 months. And another one effectively turned up at my place, and he said, hey, you know what? My wife has left, and I can't face going back to my own home. So you're going to have to put me up for 8 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And he stayed in my place, and I literally nursed his mental health back, even though I myself was going through that huge trauma at the same time. But I nursed his mental health back, would you believe, after 8 weeks, and he's come back a really strong guy, and he's come back, he's now, very successful in his career. He's got a new partner, everything great. But it took him that period, that post-divorce, post-separation period, that to go through that whole trauma process, but to realize his own potential. And that's the power of this thing, of thinking differently. It's realizing that you actually have potential outside of your marriage, because you threw everything into your marriage.
Yeah.
And forgot about who you were as a man. And that's really, what I learned for myself, and the effect these events had on my life, on my personal psyche. And I thought to myself, hey, you know what? If I found a way through, and these experiences are pretty unique to me, because I don't think every other guy who's got divorced has lost other friends and so on, have had quite the experience that I've had of it.
Not with the number that you have. I mean, you threw out a pretty big number there. That's staggering, and alarming. That being said, what we do know is that the suicide rate for middle-aged white males, which is, the segment of this population that gets hit usually the hardest with divorce, middle-aged white males are committing suicide at the highest rate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's because of situations like this. So, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's fantastic that you're on today, because we need to draw attention to mental health and, quite honestly, going through a divorce or a really bad separation, and which seems kind of funny to say out loud because I've never heard anybody say that they went through a good one. Um, these are traumatic, and it is without a doubt, at various levels, a mental health issue.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. The statistic you quote is quite well, that you say, okay, it's white male who are having these problems. Not all of it, of course, is due to divorce
Oh,
or
right,
relationship.
right, right. Yeah, and I didn't mean to imply that. If I did, I apologize. Yeah, no, it's not all due to divorce, but
Yeah,
I mean, the divorce rate is 51%. It's a pretty big number.
correct. However, so in just to be a little more accurate, um, related to divorce, you have right now 10 men dying every day in the US through suicide related to relationship and divorce. Now, the statistic is obviously higher of actual suicide rates, but I say 10 men's quite a few guys, just for that one reason. There are, as I say, there are other reasons, but for that one reason, that's enough, I think, to justify somebody standing up and saying, hey, I want to do something about this or help these guys, right?
Well, listen, this is another area, and I always jokingly say that when you get into men and their identity, it's people will ask you a handful of questions, and they usually circle around, what's your name, what do you do, maybe are you married? And so this is just how we identify people.
Yeah,
And if you've gone through a traumatic experience as a male, some of those questions can be terribly difficult.
they sure can. They
Yeah.
sure. And especially when you're asked these questions at a party or something, I always find it difficult to answer all these questions. I would rather be asked something abstract. That's an interesting subject. But yeah, as you say, Mike, these are typically the things that define us. What do you do? Where do you work? How many kids do you have? What's your income? That kind of thing. We all kind of like then have an understanding of when we're speaking to somebody new, where do I fit in with this person's psyche?
Right.
Is
Right.
this somebody who's going to be my friend because we have a similar background, etc., etc. You kind of do ask all those questions to see where you fit in that potentially future relationship, and I
Sure.
think that's what it is. I'll just add another thing, is that we create archetypes in society of what a man should be, which are
Yeah.
changing. Yeah, right. But they're definitely changing. They're changing. I mean, that's a good thing. That's a progressive thing. But the archetype historically has always been a man should not talk about their problems. You got to suck it up. You got to man up. And society puts this pressure on men that you've got to be a high performer, and so on and so forth. There are all these archetypes and societal pressures that are on men. And then you tie that up with this situation that is as sensitive as divorce, or as sensitive where, it by its nature demands that you speak about your internal problems, and you come up, right? So it is, it's immediately, how can I say, it's immediately at odds with who you are as a person, as a man. Yet now you're suddenly faced with a situation where you have to completely be a different person in order for you to fix your problem, right? You have to be an open person to fix a problem, whereas men tend not to be so open. So that creates this deadlock situation. And how do you deal with that as a man? You're in a deadlock, you're in a mental deadlock where I don't want to be that, but I have to be that if I'm going to fix it. And there's nobody telling me, explaining to me that is what I have to be, or how I can be that person, how I can be that open person. How can I be in a safe environment, for example, and talk about my problems and not feel threatened, or not feel that I'm being, being a bit soft, et cetera, et cetera.
There's a
So,
risk here too, because, right, I think what you're discovering is that to a large degree, once a situation like this occurs, there's a choice that needs to be made, right? And a lot
yeah.
of guys will take that situation and have a lot of questions, and they bury it deep in their soul. I talk about this often and hope that they don't have to talk about it. Or you can make the choice to, work through and come out the
Mhm.
other side. And I think it's better to come out the other side, because here again, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but the amount of folks, and I'm saying folks because I'm incorporating men and women in this,
Yes.
that go through a traumatic divorce, that don't clear away the baggage,
Mhm.
the divorce rate goes up. So in other words, people are getting divorced at a higher rate, second divorce, third divorce. And the reason for that is simple. They didn't clear out the baggage after the first one. And they just think like, I'm going to keep going on and on and on. Right. So I think it's important, to have that mindset of, okay, I'm going to die, just like we do after a game, right? I mean, we get to play Monday morning quarterback after a game, and
Yeah.
try to X and O what went wrong, what went right. And I think it's important, when you're in a pivot situation like this, that to do that, because like I said earlier, it takes two people to tango. No matter, but both people are at fault. So you're really at a point where you got to play Monday morning quarterback and figure out what went right, what went wrong, fix what went wrong, and then move on.
Yeah. And here's a really interesting story for you. And so what you're describing there is actually getting closure
Yeah,
on, right?
sure.
That
Yeah.
is getting closure, okay, on what happened. There were events that happened in Mr. X's marriage, whatever, right? Or Mr. Y's marriage. And he never got closure on that. Now the women get closure because they have uh, a kind of a community around them. They're able to talk to others. They're able to exchange
Yeah.
ideas, and they're able to
They're
get that
they're
closure.
better at that. They seem
They're
to be.
better. They're 100% better. We're like no good at that stuff, right? Now, so we're now wandering around without closure, with this kind of like unable to talk on top of that, and in addition, having all these thoughts going around and around in our heads, trying to figure out what the answers are. And a lot of men think that they are their own best psychologist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'll figure out my shit myself, I don't need anyone else to tell me.
I was at
So
a doctor's appointment this morning, and he described everything that's gone on with COVID as, oh, everybody's an expert now. So it's
yeah,
kind of like that, right?
so it's crazy. And
Don't
here's the
be a
thing,
smart ass.
don't be a smartass. And now here's another thing. Now on top of that, you got a lot of psychologists and therapists are women. So there's
Yeah.
another thing, right? So and men will not feel comfortable going to a woman to talk about their problems with another woman.
Some guys do, but I totally agree with you. I think
Yeah.
that there's something, and I this is a funny way to put it, but I mean, I don't know what other way to derive it. I mean, I could circle back to the Bible, but I mean, look at we're kind of cavemen, right? We need to sit around the fire and tell war stories. We like that,
Right.
but we don't do enough of it. And I think that a lot of guys are built for it if they can find the safe environment or the safe in person, to
Mhm.
be around, to talk about these things. My experience has been that they enjoy it. They get a lot out of it. There's a lot of fulfillment knowing that, hey, you know what? I heard you say you've gone through this too. And you're right. It does suck. And, we kind of, put our arms around each other, sing Kumbaya and
Yeah.
and work through it together.
Yeah. And we, there's this whole thing about, guys bonding in that way. and it's a different kind of bonding. It's
Yeah.
what can I say? It's like, when you have a Mikasa Sukasa kind of thing, where it's like, if you get another guy who's okay, another macho guy, or another kind of somebody who you feel is strong enough, and strong as yourself as a man, who you can relate to. That's quite a rare thing to find, because you kind of get a lot of guys who have their friends, but they cannot relate to them because the whole relationship is all about drinking beer, or going out and doing sports, or that kind of thing.
Those are inch deep things, and
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is and you have to be intentional. There's no question about this. You have to be intentional about asking a question that's a little deeper than an inch deep. It's got to go deeper than so who's your favorite soccer player? I mean, it's got to go deeper than that.
It's got to go deeper than that, and so there has to be that friendship and that bond. But at the same time, a lot of the guys that even if they are very able to, in a manly kind of way, be sensitive, it often is the case that those within your group may not have experienced the same things that you've experienced, as in a divorce, or as in whatever the situation is, right? And so therefore they cannot even relate to what you're talking about, right? So even if they want to help you, they can't do that, right? So there's all these scenarios that kind of block that dialogue that could potentially occur between men. And it's not just about, guys just don't want to help each other, but it's also like just a physical lack of experience as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there's the other side of things. Here's the interesting thing is, so a lot of guys get divorced, like immediately or after a few months, as you mentioned, will go out and get another girlfriend, right? Or get married again, on the rebound in many cases. They haven't fixed up what's going on in their own minds, right? And will project all the kind of negative emotions that they have onto the new partner, effectively hoping that she's going to kind of solve it. Now, okay, you may get lucky, and that she may be great, very supportive, and you go through the first couple of years, where you go through the hard bit, and then suddenly you find this nirvana where you found this partner who's really going to work. But a lot of relationships in those early days, the new relationships, they don't work out because both parties sometimes are projecting their past onto the other person.
Right.
Now, on top of that, what's really a nightmare for a lot of guys, and I speak to a lot of people in what I do, right? Men and women. I speak to a lot of men and women. Now, here's the thing. So guys will screw up somewhere. They'll make a mistake. She may really like him. She will then say, okay, but it's not working for me because you haven't got over your problems and so on. Whatever the reasons, whatever the things are. Or sometimes women just will not tell you why they left. This is the onward. This is the next girlfriend I'm talking about, not the ex-wife, but
right.
And so you've had an ex-wife leave you. You've had the next girlfriend leave you, and you still have no idea as to what the hell you're doing wrong, right? So, this actually happened to me. So I go to an ex-girlfriend and I say, look, all right, you know what? No problem. You told me last week how much you loved me, right? This week you suddenly say this is not working out for me, and you message me on a text message to break up. I say, fine, no problem at all. But would you do me a favor? Would you please tell me what it is about me that I can fix? And you know what? 9 times out of 10, they don't tell you. They just, at that point, they block you.
All right, man. So now I have to ask you. I'm laughing. Do you include that as part of your, we haven't even gotten to this. Do you include that as part of your training? Because I gotta tell you, that would, to me, that's a great question. And I'm probably adult enough at this point in my life to ask it, but how many dudes would actually have the guts to ask that question? Do you
To
to a woman that they've dated or been married to? How many guys would actually ask that question?
Okay, well, hey, this is the way I train it, right? If I'm going to train somebody to say to
Yeah.
deal with that, right? This is how I do it. I say, look, you don't need to ask that question in terms of in an angry way to say, "Oh, what's wrong with me? You know, I'm a great guy, blah, blah, blah," right? You know, why'd you do that to me now? You don't have to approach it that way. The best way to approach this thing, and which is actually the logical and the right way, I believe, is to actually go ahead and say, look, you know, I don't want this thing to keep happening to me, you know, where my relationships keep breaking up. I want to be a better man
Yeah.
for other women out there, you know, for any women that I date. You know, I'm a decent man, but I want to be a better man, and only you can tell me how to be a better man because you know me intimately enough to understand me enough. And you've left me, that's not a problem, but please tell me what it is about me that made you want to leave me, so that I don't make the same mistakes again, so that I become a better man for other women. That's the way to position it, I think. And in that way, I have had responses, you know, from women. You know, when I positioned it that way. So that's what I train to say. You know, you have to think a bit more logically in terms of
Yeah.
in terms of thinking about how are you perceived by other people, both men and women, and how you know, and also to actually have in your conversation a higher cause or a higher purpose in mind, to say, I want to do this to improve myself, rather than what's so terrible about me, why are you being such so and so, you know, XYZ, you know, BITCH, whatever to me.
Yeah. 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 So,
You know,
when you're working, when you uh, entertain a new client and they come to you and they're like, yeah, you know, I'm going through it. How do
mhm.
you, how do you, I'm not even sure what the right word, how do you assess like where they're, where they're at? Cause there's different levels. I mean, listen, I've been married for, this year will be 26 years. So it's just over 25 years.
It's
And,
the goal. Yeah.
you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody, oh, every day has been awesome. I mean, nobody, I don't even, nobody says that, but
Yeah.
I've watched guys go through this divorce thing, and I've seen family and friends go through it. It's traumatic. It's painful. It's hard to see them go through it. You know, you question yourself in terms of like, gosh, what do I want to say here to help them out? You know, you don't want to be judgmental. You know, you're trying to be sensitive to their feelings. So how do you assess that situation? Because I'm just saying, from my personal experience, you know, I found it hard. You know, it's just difficult to see somebody you love go through a, a situation like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is to start to get a release, you know, from others, and to start to begin. I'm not saying in any way that one or two or even 10 conversations is enough to give them closure, right?
Right. Yeah.
But to at least begin to let them have closure on. So one of the questions that I ask is, you know, give me the three things or the four things that are troubling you the most right now in your mind. It can be anything. It can be anything. It can be, you can have work pressure. It could be, you know, it could be a financial issue, or it could be related to the divorce and the separation. But just give me the four or five things uh, that you know that are troubling you most at the time, at this particular time. And what that does is it actually opens up their thought process to start thinking about themselves a little bit, because you know we seldom ask ourselves the question, you know, I'm feeling a little bit down, but I have no idea what the reason is, you know. So we never really sit down, ask ourselves that question is that what is it that's troubling me the most, you know? I'll give you an example. The other day, I was just like feeling really down. I just couldn't figure out what it is. And, I asked myself this question to like, what is it that, deep down that's really troubling me? Because my life is okay. It's pretty good, right? And I found myself realizing that I'm troubled as to, am I a good enough father to my son, to my kid,
Yeah.
right? And that's what's really troubling me. Have I done the right things? When I see him, do I behave in the right way? And it's troubling me because I'm always self-critical. I'm thinking about, oh, I did this wrong, or maybe I didn't quite say that correctly. And maybe is he getting influenced in a negative way by something that I say, that I'm trying to do the right thing, but I'm actually doing the wrong thing, etc., etc. Yeah. So basically, when I ask clients the initial questions, those are the things that I first, just to get an idea of where their mind is at this particular time, is what are the things that are actually on your mind. It can be good things, bad things, the whole thing, but 4 things, 4 or 5 things. Just tell me what's on your mind. And is there anything that, have you thought about what it is that could be causing this emotion, XYZ emotion? Have you actually, looked within yourself, asked yourself the questions? That opens up a lot of doors initially. Yeah. And then, we can get into specifics, in terms of finding out whether somebody is troubled, a man is troubled by when we go deeper into the divorce kind of area and all of the post-traumatic stress area and all this kind of thing, then I start to look at specific events to say, are there any specific events you can tell me about in the past that really, really like stand out in your memory consistently, that really you cannot get past? You cannot, build a bridge between this side of the river and the other side,
Yeah.
that you need to now go to somebody external to speak with about. And honestly, that is because there are events in the past, I know in my past there were certain things that happened between me and myself and my ex that were, for me, really traumatic, and they really caused me anguish and pain, but they were never discussed in the marriage, never discussed. And I tried so many times to bring it out, but it just, there's some I think one does have a lot. There are some women who are quite reserved, and so will not talk about things, will not bring it up until they're really angry, and then it turns into a huge nightmare, and nothing really gets resolved. So as an external third party who is not a friend, because it's good that I'm not a friend, because I can be completely impartial.
Yep.
Right. I'm not a relative and I'm not related to that person, but I am saying, look, you can just use me as a soundboard to tell me about the things that trouble you the most, and let's get into the events, and then let's talk about what may have caused those events, and then I go from there. So these are the kind of questions that I ask, but I lead in a very on a very shallow slope. I don't just
Yeah.
you can't just
start dropping bombs on them.
No, so it's very shallow slope, and I think that's what brings men out, because men are not used to just jumping straight deep dive into things, unless it's IT or technical or something like this.
Or football. Yeah.
Yeah, football or building bridges or something.
So my question to you is this, as we begin to wrap up today, for a man who might be listening right now and they're kind of going through a bad time, what would you say to encourage them to, and I'm going to say it this way, primarily because I say it this way a lot, to not go it alone. Whether they seek you out or seek me out or seek a friend out, what would you say to encourage them to just try to get the train back on tracks a little bit, if you know what I mean?
Okay, I mean, in terms of that, the first thing I would say is that the first thing is in order to avoid a one-on-one discussion with anyone, right, and get too deep and get too kind of like heavy duty about it, what guys tend to do is they'll say, okay, I'm going to go to YouTube and I'm going to look at 10 different channels, right? You know, and I'm going to get all the information I need, which is one way because it's incoming only. You don't have any dialogue with
Yeah.
YouTube, right? So you go, there's loads of therapists and people out there, right? So that's one thing that I would say avoid that because you're going to get so much extra information that you just don't need about millions of people's problems that relate to you.
It's so true. Yeah.
Another thing guys do, okay, is they're gonna go out and just go and get drunk with their friends, have a great time. Post-divorce men are known for just going out and getting blindly drunk and going out every night, with their friends, right? To the point where their friends are sick of them as well. Now, so avoid that, I would say.
You said that like you've experienced that yourself.
I've been there, but I also have a couple of friends who've I've seen do that, and I thought to myself, hey, you know what? I was there a couple of years ago, and I know what I'm going through, and I feel like saying, I wish I could bring you out, right? Of this, because, but they have to have that journey sometimes. It's a short journey.
For sure.
So let them have it, but I as a friend, I wouldn't let it persist for years and years.
Right.
For sure. If I saw a friend going downhill like that, I would not let that. I'd say, okay, you get this out of your system, this crazy period you're going through, for a couple of months, 3 months, whatever. But ultimately, it's going to damage your health, right. And now you need to re-strategize, right? So I think your original question was, how do I, actually, what was your
just encourage guys that are going through a hard time. What would you say? Yeah.
And then to encourage guys to then so first of all, I eliminate what they shouldn't be doing, and then the second thing is I would say, okay, what is best to do, how to bring yourself into seeking help, is to acknowledge within yourself that you need help. You cannot ever do anything in life until you acknowledge there's a problem there in the first place, right? So please, I say to a lot of people, just acknowledge that there is an issue. They are not issues of mental health. You're not a mental person. This thing about, I'll tell you another thing, this stigma surrounding mental health is like, if I need to seek a therapist or I need to see a specialist or I need to speak to somebody else, right? Oh, I must be crazy, right? Right. And that is such a misperception. If you go to the gym to build up your body, and you seek a personal trainer to help you do that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's got any issues with doing that. Or you go to a dietitian about your diet, or you go to, do a training course about, how to be a better business manager or whatever. Everyone seems to be okay about that. As soon as you come to mental health, it's like, oh, I'll try and avoid the specialists, because that thing is equals crazy. But that's the one perception that I really.
And I tend to, a lot of times I find myself saying to people, they may ask what I do, and I'll say something along the lines of maybe like just helping guys get clarity around their lives, and they look at me like I'm crazy, and I think to myself, well, I mean, we all go through periods of life where we need a little clarity around some, items in our life. I mean, heck, listen, half of us can't figure out what to have for dinner.
Right.
Absolutely. And so when it comes to major decisions that one has to make in their life, I think it's okay to have somebody there to help walk through and give you a peace of mind. Just kind of poke you in the chest and go, have you thought about, if you thought about this question, if you thought about that question, and at the end of the day, I think that's what a good coach does, whether you're talking about divorce or life or whatever it is, because I don't have the answers, and I'm not, guess what? I'm not going to come up with the answers. You're going to come up with the answers. I'm just here to ask really good questions, you know?
Right. So true, so true. And then a way around that, Mike, around this, the whole stigma that is surrounded with mental health is this thing about where, a lot of guys say, okay, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this?
Yeah.
Right? But it's a great way to take their mind off the fact that there's a mental health issue here. Let's say, like, let me show you what you can do with your life,
Yeah.
right? Being an
Sure.
example to you, right? Look at the things. I mean, honestly, the things I've done are amazing, right? In my life since I got out of that negative mindset, and I fixed a lot of stuff, right? And spoke to psychologists, spoke to these neuroscientists, a lot of really cool people around me, taught me a hell of a lot. Now, and as a result, my life is XYZ. And, it's not just me. There are many men out there who have, like you say, you're a turnaround coach, right? You have,
Yep.
you do a lot of turnaround work, right, with men. And you must have many, many examples of how splendid and, multicolored their lives has become later on as a result of actually just getting a little bit of help, figuring out what to do. And the objective is to actually make a better life. The
Hey,
objective is not.
listen, it's as simple as this. I mean, I don't mean to dumb it down to stupid, but anybody that's ever driven a car, that's a lot of
Yeah,
us. How many times have you found yourself going down the wrong street and you decided to make a U-turn?
100%.
That's it.
Absolutely.
That's all I'm talking about here. And,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what this is. We all do U-turns. Although don't do a U-turn where it says no U-turn. That's dangerous. I'm not encouraging that. But yeah, I mean, this is it to me, it's about that simple. And listen, I don't know anybody. I haven't talked to a single person in my lifetime that hasn't been faced with a serious decision that didn't ask at least one, regardless of if the person was a coach, right? They asked somebody. So what would you do in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean,
Exactly.
let's be real here. I mean, what we're talking about is helping people at a pivotal point in their life, so that they can make a decision to push forward. Because the bottom line is, and a lot of people don't like to hear this, it's a choice. It's flat out a choice. You can either lay in bed, pull the sheets up over your head and call it a day, or you could do what you did. You had friends going down around you and you just made a conscious decision to push forward.
Yeah, 100%. It's when you're at the crossroads at the bottom part of your life, when you're at the lowest point, you're at a crossroads at that point. And that's the crossroads where you
That's
need
it.
to make a decision. Am I going to go left or am I going to go down or am I going to go up? You got nothing to lose, so you may as well go up, right?
Hell yeah. Make
Yeah.
that decision.
And that's what I'm trying to encourage people to do,
Well, I think you're doing good work, and I love what you're doing. It's important. I mean, the numbers around, people getting divorced and the trauma around it. I mean, they're big numbers, and oftentimes people need help going, down that journey. So that being said, and we'll put this, as we always do, in the show notes, of course. Madhur, how can everybody get a hold of you? What's your website? What's, all that fun stuff? How can people get a hold of you and maybe reach out to you regarding this?
I have a link which I think will be provided on at the bottom of your podcast, right?
Yep.
It's available through that, and the link is effectively takes you to the training course that I provide, or at least to have an initial consultation call with me, and then we can discuss about what your personal needs are. It could be training. It could be that you need, a more one-on-one basis, longer-term discussion. Maybe you just need a buddy by your side. That's somebody who understands what you're going through, and you just want to have a chat with somebody. So there's a lot of those kind of things that I offer, but effectively, it's available through the link that I'm going to send through to yourself there, Mike.
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, and just link on that. Website wise, I don't actually have the one would have to log into my portal in order for you to access the services, but the initial link does give a very clear idea of the work that
yeah,
I
we'll
do.
get it up, and everybody can check you out. And if they want to make contact, they can certainly do that. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show today. I know this is kind of a heavy, it's kind of a heavy topic, quite honestly, but I mean, that's why I'm here. True Man Podcast. We want to effectively reach out to men and help them become better dads, better husbands. And if they can't, and if they're going through a hard time as a husband, we want to make sure that we get them the help that they need. So these discussions are critically important. So greatly appreciate you being on the show today to talk through it with us.
Yeah, I think it's great work that you're doing there, Mike, as well. So it's really, really good. Helping, it's just it's not anything heavy. It's about trying to help people get through the difficult times in their life.
That's right.
And realize what's amazing potential that you have.
That's it, man. We just want everybody to live their best life. You only get one, and you just will take full advantage of it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and we don't want to forget that, right?
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Right. Take care.
Bye, Mike.